Namaskar. Hi. We're going live with Mr. Anubhav Nayaar, Senior Director, APAC at Rakuten Viber. We're talking about basically the current situation about the pandemic, the COVID-19 that the whole world is suffering from, and how the Viber, the messaging apps, and all these IT can help fight the pandemic. Welcome, Mr. Nair.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
What do you think? What is the role of the messaging apps in fighting such global pandemic? What do you think?
We've looked at two specific areas where messaging apps, communication apps such as Viber have played a very important role. I think the first is at this time, given the fact that we cater to so many users, we aim to provide trustworthy and authentic information. And we do that predominantly through some of our local partnerships or working with different government bodies. We realize that there's a lot of information, a lot of rumors, a lot of different opinions floating. So we always encourage our users and also provide a platform to get access to this authentic information. So I think that's number one. And I think the second aspect is the fact that most people are today working or living or studying at home. And at this time of social distancing, it's very, very important the role that as a company, as a platform that we provide of bringing people together, whether it's through messaging, whether it's through group calling, or different aspects like that.
But one small correction: we don't say we say physical distancing, not social distancing. Social closely, but physical distancing. That was the term
Ah,
WHO
sure.
used
So
before, but afterwards
it's
WHO also corrected that. So we're live on
it's
Facebook on Karobar TV and Karobar National Economic Daily also, and Karobar YouTube channel also. So, have you seen any changes in your consumer behavior in terms of app usage in such pandemic time compared to the normal times?
So I think you rightly said we keep hearing it so often that people need to be socially close and physically distant. That yeah, sometimes we do end up mixing words. But what we have seen is that a lot of people are using us extensively and specifically using features which are around groups. So our group messaging, for example, and even our group calling has actually gone up by approximately 135 to 140%, which basically means it's doubled or more than doubled in Nepal itself. Overall, also we have seen close to a double increase or close to a 85 to 90% increase on all our services. What that does tell us is that as people are at distance, at physical distance from each other, they are firstly not only speaking to each other more, which is very interesting over messaging platforms, and but what they're also doing is that they're getting in touch with more and more people. So we started seeing that as a trend, and I think even as individuals, we see it that at this time, while all of us are physically isolated or are in different places because of this entire distancing aspect, people are actually getting in touch with more family, more friends, which is always a positive sign.
But the question is, in the times of pandemic and in the times of other disasters as well, people are not very used to with all these modern technologies. How do you think Viber has played a big role in fighting such pandemic?
So I'll give you two specific examples. We've partnered with the World Health Organization at a global level, and we've also, for example, partnered with the Ministry of Health in Nepal itself. What we our basic idea over here is that we want to ensure that the message which bodies such as WHO or the Ministry of Health have reaches the end consumer. So from our side, what we have done is whether it's the use of a bot or the use of a community, we have um, we have opened that service on Viber, and we've actively promoted within our own app. So that for people, sometimes when you activate things, it's not good enough. You also need to ensure that people can discover it within your product and platform, and that's why for partnerships or initiatives such as this, we've actually sent in-app messages asking each of our user to subscribe or to join services such as this, so that they can on a daily basis have access to information which is very, very trustworthy, coming straight from the ministry. It's not really something which is coming as a forward, which you're not sure is it true, not true. So I think one of the things which we do ensure is providing people access, and we do it aggressively from our side also, to information that they can rely on.
So that means you are helping fight all these fake news and rumors and all these. Can you little bit elaborate on your partnership a bit more?
So when we realized, specifically the almost the size of this pandemic and the way things are sort of really increasing in different countries. For example, in Nepal, we partnered with the Ministry of Health, and we opened a community for them, which we immediately made as an official community, so that people also realized that it's authentic and trustworthy. And what we also did was we promoted it to all our users. We also promoted it across different digital platforms. We also promoted it through certain advertising options within our own platform and network. We also asked some of our key partners, key influencers, to educate people, to reach out to their followers, asking them to join this community. And our role over here is we're a platform. We're a platform for which, or rather on which, bodies which are authentic or bodies which are such as the Ministry of Health can share information. So while they take care of the entire content, take care of what are the latest updates because they will know best, we ensure that we are always providing all support, everything that we can do to ensure firstly that community is running really well. Secondly, it's also growing, which means people are coming to know about it. And thirdly, encouraging people to follow it. I think it's very important that one is people follow it, if you do need to share information with your friends and family and loved ones, it's better to see the information on that community rather than something which has come as a forward from somewhere, because at least you know this is trustworthy.
Does Viber started this initiative after the pandemic, or earlier also you had such plans for the countries like Nepal or India, where the people are less tech savvy and less literate, educated? But how can you help these people through IT, which is a little bit more technology based thing?
So I think firstly, we've been doing this all along. Not this kind of a specific initiative, but we realize like in a lot of countries, specifically in Asia, there are a lot of people who are entering the smartphone for the first time. A lot of people are getting access to internet for the first time. So we realize that education and consumer education is very important. That's number one. And we also try and sometimes work with partners to see if we can evaluate how services such as Viber can be made available to them at a more affordable rate. So in different countries, we sometimes partner, for example, with telcos and look at subsidizing the data that people need to spend. But more importantly, what we do is within our own, we are always encouraging users to try different features. So, like I mentioned, one of the examples is we've seen group calls to really increase. So, people are using Viber today for conference calls very, very regularly, very different to what it was maybe even 3 months back or 2 months back. Um, and therefore, from our side, we try and send certain messages to people, all our users, whether they're using us right now or even to people outside, to suggestions on how they can use this service. Because at the end of it, that's the basic job that Viber has. We're a communication platform that brings people together, and that's sort of our core DNA. So there's a lot of time and effort that we spend, whether it's working with partners or ensuring that our product usage um, is is as easy and as accessible to everyone.
Uh, what are other ways that the big companies like Fiverr can help create resources from the, let's say, the education point of view, or like in such pandemic situation or in any other disaster situation? How can you help create resources to in future too?
It's an interesting question. So not only for, I guess, not only for pandemic. I mean, I always want to look at things also positively. That what is it that we can do, which can help for a certain good cause. So one example I can talk about is we recently partnered with the UN Women, United Nations Women in Nepal, and which is all about again opening up a community with them, doing different aspects introduced recently. But essentially, it's about helping build women empowerment, helping women get equal access to different opportunities. Uh, that's an initiative which is also very very important and very close to our heart, because we realize that we have access to a large audience, and with that comes a lot of responsibility. So sometimes it can be associated with that. But in the past, also, for example, in Sri Lanka, there was a big 1.5, 2 years back, there was a big dengue epidemic. And what we did over there also was we worked with the Ministry of Health, did a lot of work on consumer education, do's and don'ts on how people can protect each other from this, and similar such other tactics. So I guess there are two aspects. One is reacting to a certain situation, like this pandemic has happened. So, what are the things we can do? But we also have certain ongoing efforts, like I gave the example of the United Nations Women, which are not necessarily anything to do with a certain problem or certain situation that has arisen at a given point of time, but to fight a larger cause.
Like you have been partnering with the Ministry of Health and Population, you have been partnering with UN Women. Is there any plan to partner with education, maybe Ministry of Education of Nepal, so that the kids, today's kids, could grow up in much more ready environment, IT wise or socially information wise, ready environment for the future, such kind of disasters, and also for the livelihood also.
Yeah, I mean, so firstly, the answer is yes. We would, and that's something which we very look at very aggressively. So we would love to partner with the Ministry of Education, and just to give you an example, in certain other countries, for example, in Eastern Europe, we actually have such initiatives that have gone live recently. Because what we realize is, like people, even like everyone else, like corporates, etc., even students are right now at home. So today, Viber has the ability of getting 20 individual members on a group call. So does that mean that can we potentially have classroom lessons happening through Viber? Certainly possible. Does that mean that can we have, for example, homework or specific assignments, sort of using Viber as a technology? Again, certainly possible. So different areas, but I couldn't agree more. I mean, for us, education is right up there. It's always a function of how at the end of it we also would love to work with the ministry. So if for us it's always like if we have an interest from both sides, we are very happy to provide support in every way and take this forward.
Because the education question has come out of this pandemic, because also most of the schools and colleges are closed, and some of the
Yep,
schools colleges they have online classes. So I think it's right time Bible can join hands with the education ministry of Nepal government and work together. Uh, in
absolutely.
that way, yeah.
No, I mean, I was just completing what you were saying. I mean, I absolutely agree. Like I mentioned, a few countries we have seen that happening, and it's something which we very, very strongly believe in. And at the end of it, again, it helps. Um, it's sort of our responsibility that if we have a platform so diverse and used by so many people, we are always looking at ways to provide more and more people access to things which are very, very beneficial and important to them.
Uh, Coming back to again to the pandemic and current situation, how do you think can IT companies get married with health and education and create sustainable backup in fighting such pandemic or endemic or any other disaster in future?
IT, are you saying like apps or are you saying companies
IT,
basically?
apps, yeah, and
Okay.
health and education.
So I think first is for organizations. I think organizations themselves have realized that their way of functioning will be probably quite different, even once things become completely okay. Because I think I always look at things positively, and I think what's been really amazing is that a lot of people have not, could probably have never in their lives worked in such a setup where people are working from home for the last, in some countries, 3 to 4 months now. So I think the new norm, as what people say, would be very, very different than what we've all our lives been used to. And I think it's very important for companies to be agile and adjust to that new norm. So I think what that does mean is that definitely the workforce would be on a more flexible basis, which means there could be potentially organizations which are working partial work from home, partial from office, keeping in mind also a bit of social distancing. So I think that's one aspect purely from an employee perspective. I think the other aspect is also the fact that it tells us how interconnected the world economy is right now. How people, because of frequent travel, because of people just moving from one place to another, and I think that's going to be also be an interesting space on how companies adapt to that. Um, Naturally, it does make a lot of, I guess, leaders, worldwide leaders, specifically like in the healthcare sector, but also in the technology sector, understand that um, all companies need to be, maybe putting in a higher investment on health and health-related initiatives. So maybe the role of even tech companies is to enable that. That's what's happening today. Also, I think in whichever way possible. So maybe it's not only about the health sector, but it's also about how technology companies, IT companies can improve things in this particular space.
We have been hearing about this new normal every day now after this pandemic thing. What do you think? This new normal definitely is going to bring a lot of opportunities for the IT companies and messaging apps and all these things. But there are challenges as well. What challenges do you foresee?
I think the first one I've spoken about. I mean, of course, it's going to be a challenge, but I do feel confident people will be able to adapt to it, and that is this entire aspect about how offices will function going forward. Um, I think a lot of people have been used to going to office or a physical space for years now. So how do teams work more effectively when there is a bit of a physical distance between them? Um, Clearly, there are some functions where they have to be together, but I think there'll be a lot of businesses and a lot of functions which will need to adapt to this quickly, and that's going to be a bit of a challenge. But I think this entire time is sort of is training people how to handle this. I think that's one aspect to it. Um, I think the second aspect is also about how agile not only companies but even people can be and different organizations can be because I mean, no, it's such a new. This entire pandemic is so new that right now nobody has the perfect information where they know what's going to happen, how it's going to happen. So I think agility in a company to adapt to different situations very quickly is going to be very, very vital. Um, and it's true for all businesses. Um, I think at this stage there are certain aspects where yes, for services such as ours, they are being used more. But even for us, we realize like our own products and services need to adapt to this entire pandemic. What we were thinking of in terms of how the service should develop over a period of time has to some extent changed because of the situation that we are in right now. So a lot of services which we may have felt would be very relevant, maybe even 6 months back, may not be so important. And whereas aspects about bringing people together who are not sort of physically away from are physically away from each other become more important. I mean, the best example I can give is a few months back, Viber just had group calls for 4 or 5 people, and we immediately realized like this is a time when we need more and more people to get together, and that's why we immediately looked at increasing, and we've done that. We've increased over the last month or so our overall audio calling usage to 20 people because we realized that's what the new norm is today. And I think that's my point about agility. I think companies need to adapt to that and adapt to that very, very quickly.
Uh, a little bit out of the track, related to the topic, but a little bit out of the track question. Now, after this pandemic broke out, Zoom, founder of the Zoom, has been listed as a billionaire in the Forbes. The Bezos has been increasing his wealth. All the IT related companies and the founders, they have been increasing their wealth. So, do you think that the traditional concept of industrialization has changed, and now the IT companies are going to be the leader of the world tomorrow, and they are going to lead?
Difficult to comment that. I mean, I think there are, I wouldn't completely agree that all IT companies are doing fantastically well. And even for all companies, there can be sometimes within a large organization, there can be certain parts of the business which are doing really well. And then there are certain parts of the business which are not doing so well. So, like I said, it's the new norm. Very difficult to say that, but I think it's it's going to be an interesting challenge for all companies. It doesn't matter which sector you belong to, because, like I said, I mean, and that's what we're saying, right? It's the new norm. So the fact that it's new means that companies will really need to adapt and change themselves the way they work. Maybe even change some of their product and service offerings. So it's sort of very difficult to say that okay, there are certain set of companies which will really benefit and some won't, because if you look at any company across, there'll be some aspects even for companies which have apparently gained certain services because of this situation. There'll be something else which is balancing it off. So I don't think there'll be any company which is just completely gained because of this. Um, it's I think what is sort of important is that as people sort of adopt to this new livelihood, it's about ensuring that you're offering services which have that context, and the context to the current situation is very, very important. So I don't think this is a question about sectors. I think it's a question about um, companies literally reinventing themselves.
So, in this new normal, the messaging apps companies like Viber, where do they found themselves?
I think our one of our biggest, I would say, responsibilities right now is reliability. I think it's very, very important and something which we're very, very proud of at Viber, where we ensure that our service does not have downtime, and we're always consistently providing every user across the world, whether it's in Nepal or it's here in Singapore or in the US, whichever part of the world, we always try and ensure that we're providing a service that is extremely quick, fast, and very, very reliable. And we always do it in a very private and secure environment. So I think for services such as us, yes, people are using us more, definitely. But I think what's sort of important is for us also to realize that at this time we need to ensure and think of different ways by which we can provide more services, which can essentially help people connect with each other. So that's something which we is important for companies, specifically for a company like Viber to focus on. And again, like I said earlier, also it's also about the fact that because we are, a lot of our users in Nepal, it's important to identify areas which we can work with different, specifically different Nepali, different local bodies, and see how we can try and help make some sort of a difference.
Nepal is not only in the current situation of this COVID-19. Nepal is very seismologically very much highly reactive place, and we have, it's only 4 5 years ago that we had a huge devastating earthquake. So in such disaster prone country or place like Kathmandu or country like Nepal, how can Viber help the mass, the people, to relate to themselves or to take precautions? How can you help on that?
So I do remember. I do remember around 4 or 5 years back when that earthquake happened, and it was a very devastating one. And I think firstly credit to the country because I was actually in Nepal at the beginning of the year, and I was amazed. I do travel a few times every year, and I'm very amazed by by the way the country has sort of really developed itself so quickly. So I think that's very very incredible. I must mention that. Um, I think at a time of any disaster, specifically if you're talking about of an earthquake, etc., I come back to the same point. It's about ensuring that you have a service that is very, very reliable and people understand how to use it. I think that's what anybody at the time of a disaster is looking at. Um, we we have seen in the past that if some challenge like that happens, then we also try and do our bit, try and see firstly to ensure that all our services within that particular geography are working perfectly fine. They are always, but it sort of becomes even more important. We did open up, I remember at that time, a service that we had called Viber Out, app called Viber Out, purely because we felt that it was very, very important for people in Nepal to do that. So Viber Out is a revenue service for us, but we just felt that, the safety of people and the fact that they need it at that time was far, far more important. And we made it completely free for only our Nepal users at that time. So what we try and do is, like I said, ensure that we have some high level of reliability, and also ensure that if there are any ways by which we can help people at that time, then we try and identify areas for cooperation immediately. It's very difficult to say one or two things that we do as a solution for all countries, but this is something which we had done in Nepal, and and that sort of always becomes a priority for us.
Uh, Lastly, what are the initiatives that you think are going to launch during this related to this pandemic or in near future?
Okay, so if you're asking related to the pandemic, I mean, I think we also realizing that it again goes back to what I mentioned earlier. It goes back to the fact that people's need for information. So we've also realized, like for example, we have a in some places we have a community working with the Ministry of Health, but in sometimes we also have bots which are like symptom checkers. So if you interact with the bot, answer certain questions, you can you get education that okay, my symptoms do not look to be something with COVID-19, or they are something, and therefore you can then decide to take the necessary action. So that's something which we've also started introducing in certain countries, working with the local body. I think the other aspect is, like we said earlier, the fact that people are at a distance from each other. We will continue launching initiatives which can basically bring people together virtually and ensure that social distancing does not happen. So um, I can't necessarily lay out my product roadmap over here, or the company's roadmap over here, but that's sort of the two areas which would be very very interesting. And finally, we spoke a lot about, for example, education, right? And that's also an example that think of ways with our existing services to help people connect in different situations. So whether it's schoolrooms, whether it's even offices, how can corporate communication happen over a Viber community? It's possible today. A lot of companies have started doing that today. How can conference calls, or rather work conference calls, happen over Viber? So different opportunities, and that's sort of the area which we're going to be focusing on for now.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing your um, initiatives related to pandemic and pandemic also. Thank you, Mr. Anubhav Nayaar, Senior Director, APSC at Rakuten Fiber. We're live on Facebook, Karobar National Economic Daily Facebook, and Karobar YouTube channel. Thank you, and talk to you again.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure, and I hope you, your family, everyone in Nepal is safe. Do stay safe.
Thank you.